Where did we leave off?
I already forgot.
God damn it. So, bro, tell me, what prompted Kaleidoscope? Like, what was your impetus for making this piece?
Well, I feel like every track I do is different. Really, I started full-time production of music in 2019, and I popped out about 80 tracks that year. And I was working off and on, and after my third album, I wanted to go totally different. And I always loved psychedelic music, Mars Volta and all that. So I decided to try and just put everything I had into an album.
What was the first? Because unlike a lot of albums, in every album, there's meaning behind stuff, right? But in guitar-based music, it's these chords go together because of the fingering positions and shit like that, or this key makes me feel this kind of way, and so like there's a pattern quotient and there's an emotional quotient to a song, or there's lyrics that need to be framed by a certain piece of music, but it's an instrumental album. It's not a guitar-based album at all. What was like the first like eureka moment you had where you were just like, oh, this is a crazy musical idea or concept, and this is how I can roll it into this record? Because I feel like there's all these little musical Easter eggs and nods that are just like very subversive and subconscious even. It's not you outward being like, yo, listen to this key change, or oh, listen to this time signature. But it's like a roller coaster ride of musical knowledge, and really just like bedroom genius on the production.
Thanks. Honestly, I think straight from the first track, the very intro, I actually wrote in 2018. It was kind of like my first aim at a psychedelic track. Mm-hmm. So I started with that. And just right off the bat, I was like, what if I had this go to this track? But then I had a whole middle track, which was a transition. So the middle part is actually the third part in a granulated form that I turned into a pad. And then, it also has the first part that's turned into a pad. So, and I was just like, man, that is so interesting. And it came together so well that, I felt like I should really stick with that route.
What's the story behind Kaleidoscope? Like when the listener, what should the listener be doing? What do you envision the listener doing when they're absorbing this piece of music?
I imagine that they're about 7 grams deep and they just start dancing, Or if you are in a meditative state, it'd be good. There are parts good for that. And while there's only 5 tracks, and I feel like, one is kind of like getting everything together, but a lot of them are very personal. And I was really trying to leave it very open for interpretation, especially like tracks 2. I put a lot of stuff in there so that people feel their own way. I think you mentioned that like certain parts stressed you out, whereas some parts aren't as stressful to me.
Well, and you play with anxiety all over the project.
Yeah, I use a lot of psychology to be honest.
There's a lot of dissonance. There's a lot of very uncomfortable textures that are put together, but they're also framed around somber passages and real pretty passages and stuff too. So like, it's definitely purposeful and by design, but I feel like you're kind of playing with the listener throughout the whole thing. It really reminds me of a DMT trip, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's great.
When you do DMT and you see the little machine elves and there's an awareness, not just a view of them, but of them of you, in the same way when you're driving on the freeway and you look over at someone and they immediately look over at you and like, they know they're being looked at and you're looking at them and then both people look away. There's a lot of moments like this on this record.
Where it's like, wait, did he intend for me to feel this way at this moment?
Yes, or wow. Just like, I'm aware of this and like, of course I am because the music says I should be, or does it? Or is it conjecture on my part, acting in accordance? It basically is the music making me anxiety,
right. or was I already anxiety
part of the music?
Yes. I really don't have an answer for that one because I feel like I try to do it for me as personal as possible so that it's at once engaging and you don't get distracted. Because I know that's a huge thing in today's where like you know, every moment can have something to offer
Right.
in every
Well,
track.
and the whole project, I mean, it's literally a trip. It's literally a journey.
Oh yeah, especially part 3 is very intense. I think that track has 13 keys or something all at once. That's
one thing that you did on this project that I've never heard of or been a part of or seen anyone do before is how the track folds in on itself from other parts of the track, and it still makes a rhythmic and musical sense. Can you kind of alliterate to that a little bit?
Man, I remember it took me like a whole month of just thinking about it because the whole core concept was, could I stack 2 songs on top of each other? And these are 2 tracks in 2 different keys, in 2 different tempos, and 2 different rhythms. One's in a 4 and one's in a 5. One's in D minor, one's in A minor, and one's in 315. One is at 256 or something.
And then how did you hold that concept in your head and then figure out how to work it out? Because at any point until we folded them on each other, there was no way for you to actually hear how they work together, like when you're producing it, right?
It's very funny because, you know, ever since classical music, they've always had variations on themes. This is technically a variation on a form. So their forms are symmetrical in a sense. So whenever I designed it, I got what I really liked, and I try and flesh out an idea on the first part, and then I built the second one around it, almost like a yin-yang way. So like I always made sure that, you know, they didn't overlap too much and become too cluttered, or the hi-hats are too messy, and, you know.
So did you do like one song and then one song, or did you do like a piece of the song and then the corresponding piece on the fold over?
You know, I'm not really sure because I actually wrote this a couple of years ago.
It's still blowing my mind that you could even think about doing it, but that you actually could do it.
I think I'm just glad it came out as good as it did. Like, because, man, the whole time I was mixing it, I was thinking of you, honestly, and I was like, man, he's going to love this.
It's literally mind-blowing. Even when I'm trying to explain it to other people, what you did, like, you just see, like, the glaze, like, come over them.
Like,
and it's
what?
like you hear words and you understand it, but it's such a different concept than 99.99% of music that's out there. Like, I don't think people get it until they experience it. And even then, I think they got to listen to it a couple times and be like, oh, that's what this is.
Yeah, I've showed it to a few people, and sometimes because they're stacked on top of each other, they don't recognize that they already heard it before.
Right,
and,
right.
You know, it's kind of like when you do a regular polyrhythm, you get the energy of a 2 and the energy of a 3, but then they come together and it has its third thing, you know?
Right.
And I feel like that kind of captures that for sure.
But it's such a neat feeling, but especially when you know what you did that went into it. And that's what I really like about this whole project. Like, it's not your typical dynamic range. It's not your typical instrumentation. Even though a lot of it was done in FL with tons of processing and everything, it still maintains this very organic feeling across the whole thing. And we've got everything from noise pieces and abrasive textures to tribal flutes to people talking in Mumbai in the background. Do you know what I mean? And like all these soundscapes. What was the whole length? Because I know you said 2018 is when you actually started.
I started, but I really got into it 2019, and
we probably had we were probably 4 sessions deep before I started like even understanding what the fuck we were doing.
Oh wow,
so
that's
like,
great.
Because I mean, it's so different.
Thank you. And a lot of that is just sheer obsession, you know, because like it took me many hours.
Now, do you plan on performing Kaleidoscope live?
I don't know, because some of these pieces, to be honest, every time I hear track 2, the ending of it, I just burst into tears. Like, I'm talking like man tears, straight bawling, like, brutal.
That's part of the curse.
I don't, part of the curse. It's literally cursed. So, you know, I put a little extra magic in that one. So I don't think I could perform it, but it wouldn't be pretty. You know?
If someone came up to you and it's like, I fucking lost my shit listening to this, or I cried or felt something listening to this, like, would that how does that make you feel as an artist?
Amazing. Like, even if I just hear little things, like, man, that really, like, somebody told me they absolutely hated one of it. Like, the psychedelic part where I go full acid. One guy was like, what is this? It's what? And he literally just, like, totally rejected it. And I just love that, you know, because I'm so used to everybody like, oh man, yeah, it sounds good.
Well,
no, but this guy's like, no, this is horrible.
I mean, you're a multi-instrumentalist. You know how to play 3 easy chords that can make someone feel uppity or make someone feel sad. You know how to program a 4-to-the-floor beat if you wanted to make someone dance. And just like with painting, we have impressionists that their goal is to paint stuff that's as realistic as possible, right? And they're really focused on, okay, this kind of oil paint right here, I want to reflect this lighting in the natural world, so I paint it like this, and like that's the whole goal of that. And then we have like, you know, like a Jackson Pollock or a Basquiat or an Andy Warhol who was making pop. Like if his paintings were, he would be pop music, but it's always reframed in a conventional way where this is way more abstract and surrealistic, more like a Dali or something like that. But with music, we forget that music doesn't have to just be something you dance to. It doesn't just have to be something that you got your heart broken to or that you work out to. Like
it
music,
can be both.
it can be both, and music still as an art form. It's okay to make music that challenges people to figure out what it is. It's okay to make music that just doesn't dumb itself down so much that you don't have to question everything about it. And I think I think as an artist, it's really brave to make a piece that challenges the listener to wrap their head around it, and to dig into it and find it. There's some really avant-garde musicians, you know, like of course like John Cage, and like Murs Bow, a lot of Japanese noise artists and stuff like that. Like it's not to dance to, it's not to go out to, it's not to ever be consumed in a commercial point of view. Like, you know, like no one's gonna put it in the back of a movie. I think your stuff though actually is very cinematic to me, and definitely could do syncs and stuff. But sometimes the music itself is supposed to be enough of an experience that's what you're listening to it for. But we don't see a lot of people making music like that anymore. We don't see a lot of avant-garde composers anymore, or anything like that in the bigger zeitgeist of everything.
I feel like a lot of that has to do with my classical upbringing, because I started with instrumental music kind of, and yeah, I always loved that feeling of building to something really huge and all these subtle background things. But I feel like a lot of people on their musical journey, they go to college, which I did, but I was always kind of stuck. Like, do I pursue classical music? Do I pursue jazz? Or do I pursue pop or rock or my own personal thing?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, stuff happened, and pretty much it kind of pushed me towards this. But because of that, I kind of got the best of both worlds, where I get the classical, you know, and the modern, and I try and bring it together and create something new. Like, I mean, I could only imagine what Beethoven would be doing if he were alive today, with all these $1 million recording studios that we have on our laptop. That guy would just go off. You know?
Yeah, he'd be going so ham. He'd probably make stuff that sounds like this. Like,
yeah.
Well, okay, so basically what I'm trying to set up is, I want to set up leaving your acoustic instruments.
Yeah.
And then going, basically you're a multi-instrumentalist, and then you kind of putting those concepts into FL, because I remember when you first started messing around with that stuff, and then basically putting yourself through that learning curve of, because you can pick up a guitar and do this shit all day. You play piano and do this shit all day.
I think, actually, you know, whenever I look back, it was kind of like music was just always my thing. I didn't even recognize it. I had a keyboard, just some crappy Casio, and I taught myself for release on it before I ever picked up guitar. And I spent like just hours trying to, and it had to, where it showed you note by note, and you could slow it down. And it wasn't until I I picked up guitar and I went to college and all that. But whenever I was working with Eccentric, I was working on an album and I really liked it, but I just feel like there's some parts that I wanted slightly different, and it kind of made me go into FL Studio. And you know,
Was there what's the technology barrier like when your mind can move so fast, but you have to force yourself to be able to break down every move into a programmed component?
I feel like because I have such a good foundation in music and music theory itself, that really helped the entire learning curve. Because a large part of it is I already know what I want to hear beforehand because I'm so used to it. Really it just takes time and a lot of studying to create on it. Because many times, and I still have that problem where sometimes I feel like I'll play a good thing, but then when it doesn't translate well to the studio.
Because there's a lot of in avant-garde music circles and stuff, there's a lot of non-musicians that make wild stuff too, but really what you're doing is you're capturing a series of cool accidents, and I feel like with your stuff it's not so much like that. It's
all very planned.
There's a very planned in purpose, and it can sound like chaos, and it can sound like a happy musical accident in there, but I notice with you everything is very deliberate, down to textures and tones, and I mean down to like white noise being in a track or not being in a track. When you're creating, are you having a series of cool accidents that incorporate themselves in, or is everything planned out like to the nth degree?
I feel like sometimes there's a little bit of both. Really, whenever I first started, I kind of had what I call the block method, where I get a good loop going and then I just keep stacking and stacking till you got just this giant thing and it just sounds really great. Mm-hmm. And then you just got to take the block and break it out and turn it into a nice arranged piece. But I definitely understand what you mean, because I love live music, particularly like synth playing, and but they always have that free flow improv that they don't ever know what they're going to play.
Right.
And
they just stick in a key.
Yeah. But it's very sound oriented, whereas mine is notes oriented. I can't really play sustain on guitar.
Rhythmic orientation, and we're literally moving transitional files around, and you're like, it's right there, and like I'm hearing. But when we get it where you wanted it, we're literally by hand moving this stuff around. When we get it where you want it, like it clicks in.
Yeah, a lot of that was just by feel. Like I think I know what part you're talking about, and a lot of it started because I used to be a dancer long before I had my accident or what have you.
I didn't know you were a dancer.
Oh yeah, I absolutely loved it. I was a dancer for many years, and but that's what got me into like psychedelic music as a whole. Because I love dancing to it. Believe it or not, it's so fun to dance to psychedelic compared to any other one, because it's like my goal is if you write a track and it's so filled with every little thing that even if you miss a step, you're still dancing and it's still part of the beat. It's where even the fall is part of the dance.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a really, really good way to put it. Like that's a really good way.
Yeah, like you literally can't dance bad to this.
How important are drugs to your music composition?
You think it would be more active in the process, but I always just write it and I think, man, I hope this sounds good on drugs. And, I try and recall it, but there is a part, the full acid part, that I actually was on I think 7. That was a weird day. Full moon, too.
I've gotten so fucked up on acid that I can't even use YouTube anymore. Like I can't even type in a title and search for anything. So I can't imagine doing any kind of production on LSD.
I assure you, I made it as dumb as possible. I linked everything. I set everything up, and all I had to do was just press play and just move some knobs. And
you captured all that.
Oh yeah,
and that's all part of
that huge thing. Composition. And actually, I captured it 7 different times, the full length. And again, I just stacked each one on top, and it was just 7 times crazier than I expected, and I could never do that again in my life.
I think personally, one thing really cool to me about this project is I am a musical minimalist. Like I'm a very very minimal person, and usually what my job is to remove more than it is to put in. But the whole basis of this and the whole way that it works is this is the most maximalist thing I've ever worked on, for sure. Again, like it's akin to like working on score for a movie or something. Any one component of this could be soloed and taken completely out of context and still be its own piece. We could take anything in section 2 and just solo one thing on there and play it all the way through, and it would still sound like a performed compositional piece in there. So that the challenge to me was literally just wrapping my head around all the stimulus at one time. But you really hear like down to like small decibel and volume changes and dynamic changes, like if something was fitting or if something was right or not.
I will say I do go in on every single instrument and I make sure all the velocities down to the very last note. You know, everything is always adjusted because, you know, and that's a common thing in classical music. There's even a class I was told where they taught you how to identify music. And one easy way to identify music by the time is how many accidentals and how much stuff is written on the page. Because the more modern music gets, the more they're very specific about, I want a, you know, big crescendo there, I want this very soft. And yeah, so I try and bring that into it as well.
And that's also, I think, probably then what gives it that really organic feeling that I was talking about earlier is it's not all quantized out. It's not all super gridded out. Even the glitches, which like the hi-hat glitches and drum glitches, which on face value seem like they would sound like artificial things. Like even your glitches remind me of the way a drummer, you know, like a good jazz drummer would be, you know, for lack of a better word, glitching as they're playing the drums right there.
Yeah.
There's a swing to your glitches too.
Thank you. That's just a lot of trial and error, and like, does that go to that one good? You know, like how does that sound after that, or you know, in context with that? Oh man.
If you had to like summarize, how many hours of your life, mental, like even just thinking about it, how many hours of your life do you put into this project?
I couldn't count. It was probably a whole year straight. You know, because again, started in 2019, but 2020 I really started working on it. 2021 picked it up a lot. 2022 I knocked out a good majority of it, and really I think the final one actually finished at the beginning of this year. Yeah, I remember because I hit you up February.
Yeah.
Wow,
man, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this project. Like I'm never gonna forget this. It's something different. It's something that I'd love to engage and talk to people about. And it's definitely one of those things for me is like when someone tells me that they like music and someone tells me that they like to nerd out on music and musical concepts and stuff, it's gonna be one of those, oh, have you checked this out? And finding projects and finding artists like that are so few and far between, but they're very definitive, and it definitely makes a statement that I'm always curious to see. Like there's some music that we listen to and we engage with because of the way it makes us feel, and then there's other music that we listen to and engage with, and I personally would like to see people experience this music.
Oh wow.
And to me it's more about it's like a good art film or like a good David Lynch movie or something for me.
You gotta show the people.
Like, I'll watch it for me too.
But really, I just want to see how you react to Eraserhead.
Past that point, I want to see what it makes someone else feel like, because I can tell a lot by that person, by what that piece does to them, because it exposes you to different things and it kind of forces you to push a different envelope.
I had a guy like that. He, this guy gave me acid, and his friend would always put on Eraserhead while we're on acid. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, Nobody wants this.
Yeah, no one wants to watch your
But probably just a social experiment, you know?
Yeah, it just probably like he just wanted to see if people were gonna bug out or not listening to it.
Hey, I just want to say thank you so much for working on this, man. You know, I do not trust my music with anybody, but I was working with you ever since back in Eccentric, and you know, you and I are just straight dork status when it comes to music.
Absolutely, man. That's why I know anything that you bring in is gonna just be fucking amazing. It's gonna be challenging, and I know that the reward at the end of going through it is just gonna be next level, and it really pushes an envelope and pushes me to be a better engineer and a better artist in my own right, just by being exposed and stuff like that. So thank you so much, man.
You too, man. And especially coming here, I feel like I learned so much just watching you and your process, because like I feel like I had this album at 9 and you just blew it straight to a 12, man.
Oh, man, that's super hard. Thank you.
Man, appreciate it.
Yeah, there we go. Quip.